Welcome to the Herpcore History podcast, presented to you by Little Shop of Horrors. Feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms for any of your feeder needs. All right, let's go ahead and get into this episode. All right, today I'm lucky enough to be joined by Mr. Bob Applegate. How are you doing today?
Any better, I'd be you.
Oh, I don't know about that. Well, excellent. So, where'd you grow up at?
Well, I was born in New Jersey, but I was drug out to California as a Navy brat at 6 months of age and been here ever since. Although current politics being what they are, I'm thinking about leaving.
All right. And then, so and ever since a young age, you've been in California up until
Correct.
this point? Okay, excellent.
Well, I've traveled outside the country and outside the state, but I mean, my residence has been in California since 1945.
Gotcha. Yes, sir. Excellent. And when did you find an interest in reptiles? When did that start with you?
According to my parents, when I was about 6 or 7 years old, I brought home my first snake, and apparently I was today I'd probably be on some kind of a drug for overactivity or something, but back then I was just a pain in the ass, and apparently if you were afraid of something, I wanted one.
I think many of us can relate with that. Do you remember what type of snake that was that you brought home?
As far as I can remember, it was probably a striped racer.
Okay, very cool. And
at the time, I got that $1 handbook on reptiles and amphibians by Zim, and the nearest picture we could come up with looked like a garter snake, but thinking back on it and everything, and because they didn't have the striped racer picture in that book, I'm pretty sure it was a baby striped racer.
Very cool. And what were your parents? What was their take on that when you popped up with that?
Their take was, well, my dad was kind of okay with it. He was a fireman as well, and been out in the hunting and all that kind of stuff. But my mother, there's no way in heck that it was coming in the house, and so my dad built me a cage and we put it underneath the house. We had a raised house with access to the underneath, and that night it got away, and I was heartbroken. So my dad made a better cage, and the next snake I brought home ended up in the bedroom. But then as years went on, and my mother kind of leveraged me from, okay, if you're going to keep snakes, you got to read about them, and you got to read to us. So you got to go to the library and get books, and my grades improved, and my attention span improved, and essentially by the time I was 12 years old, I had a 6-foot boa constrictor that was too big to fit in any cage, and my mother had gotten so used to the snakes that she would pick it up and set it out in the sun in the lawn while she was cleaning and watch it, and then go out and pick it up and bring it back in. So she adjusted.
I think it's so sweet how moms kind of after a while end up kind of championing some of the things and taking care of them, and that's something that also I can relate with, and is a sweet memory for sure. Very cool. Well, that's good that your family and your father was supportive and helped you do that. And something you brought up was a book that you referenced that you learned from, and going to the library. What were some of your early points of reference for information?
Well, my big hero was Raymond Ditmars, and I think I still have all of his books. But essentially, he was my hero because he wrote in kind of a non-technical terms, and you could almost feel like you were going on an adventure with him when he wrote, the Thrills of a Naturalist's Quest was the basis for me ending up having a snake room. I had my dreams of someday I'm going to do that, and I did. And he had some adventures. He had one fiction book that he basically traveled around the world recounting some of his real adventures, but put it together in kind of a fictionalized run. And I read that I don't know how many times, and just he was just kind of, I cared for the man, even though I never met him, enough that I was going to name one of my kids after him.
Yes, sir. Yeah. How influential early on in the hobby, and to have that resource, right? Where early on, right now in this time and age, we have it's a double-edged sword, where information is so readily available to us. Anybody can put information out there, so you don't necessarily get the best information, but it's better than no information sometimes. And
Well,
so
this
to
is
have,
true, and I can relate to that because I've written 2 books and realize that those books are my opinions, and my opinions are based on 30 or 40 years of experience, and I believe them to be correct. But anybody that wrote a book could be using their own opinions where they got off the internet from somebody that doesn't know what they're talking about.
yes, sir, yeah, yeah, books add a level of legitimacy to it, right? To go through the process to make it happen. It's kind of a natural barrier of entry there for who's going to be putting a book out. Not that
You would
people
hope
that aren't.
so, but you can self-publish. So unfortunately, there's no board of peers that approves it or goes over it and says yes, this is accurate as far as we know. There's nothing like that as far as I know.
Yes, sir. Yeah. No, for sure. Well, very cool. So from that, 6 to 7 to 12, you said you had a bow. What was your early collection like?
Well, when I guess I was 14, I had 60 or 70 snakes and a few lizards in a small bedroom. Um, then I had an uncle that built me an outdoor snake pit, and I had some snakes out there. Essentially, it was just kind of a potpourri of what I could catch. It wasn't until I got into my early teens that I realized you could trade with people nationally and internationally, or buy internationally. And so that's when I started catching locally and then selling them and using the money to buy snakes from India and Africa and a few places like that. Okay, an Indian light-faced python is now an endangered species, but back in the 60s, I could send $10 to Balasubramaniam in Madras, India, and he could mail me one, and it would show up in the post office.
How cool is that? How times have changed. And what a cool species, too, to have interest in. Very cool. And so at that young age and having it, what were your, was there a point, were there peers that you had that were also interested in it, or were you kind of just on your own there and championing that yourself?
Well, I had a few friends who would go out and snake hunt with me and stuff like that, but essentially I was sort of a loner as far as the snake collection and everything. I corresponded with people around the country, but I didn't have anybody locally to do stuff with.
Yes, sir. And so with that, when was the first time you walked into somewhere where there was like-minded people that were besides your friends group that you had?
Um, that's a good question. um, I don't think it was in high school. It was probably after high school, so that would have been in the early 60s. Um, I can't remember when IRBA started their reptile shows, and San Diego, though there was a San Diego Herpetological Society that was started by some of the professors at San Diego State, but that was more of a, study them and breathe formaldehyde rather than care about them living and trying to take care of them and eventually breed them. But it was at least something. I mean, there was people that were interested in snakes, and I ended up being a good recruiter for the San Diego Herp Society because I had about 100 and some pound python, and I knew all the pet shops and everything because I used to sell snakes to them and sell mice to them. And so I could go into the display case in front of the big shopping mall and sit there with my python and attract attention to the people going down the mall. And then they'd come in and I'd tell them about the Herp Society. So I'd like to think that I took credit for kind of eliminating or reducing the scientific approach and doing more of the, gee, this is a great pet. And rather than you scientists being able to get permits to go out and kill as many as you want and put in a pickle bottle, it's just as important for Johnny to be able to take one home and keep it as a pet.
Yes, sir. Yeah, there's value in both, right? And
Absolutely.
to have that
But they
that vision
should
as
be mutually supporting rather than conflicting.
100%, 100%, and I think seeing the evolution of citizen science and where the hobby's going, you see more overlap in that, and the contributing of both communities to each other, and the validity behind that for sure.
Well,
Well,
years
excellent.
ago, I proposed to a couple of the scientists who were studying some of the snakes that I wanted to work with, some of the milk snakes down in central Mexico and everything. And I told them if they would bring me living specimens, I would breed them, I would sell them, I would split the profits with them in any group, organization they wanted me to donate the other half to. And then when the snakes died, I would preserve them and turn them over to them for their studies. But nobody was able to actually come to me with anything I wanted that I couldn't get outside of that process. But I still think that something like that should work. I mean, some of the zoos do pretty good in breeding, but some of the private people have gone way beyond what an individual zoo can do. And the snakes in particular would be perfect animals for the private sector to take over and breed and reproduce and still have the scientific value, but still, produce animals in captivity so that if you ever figured out what wiped them out in the wild and you could correct that, you could reintroduce them into the natural habitat, similar to what they're doing with the condors and all that stuff out here in California.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. No, very cool. And I think we'll definitely circle back and touch on that as we move on here. But getting back to, your young days, high school era, obviously you were interested in reptiles. What was your early field herping like? What were you looking for? Where were you going?
Not anything I could find. I herped in Southern California, Caulfield's Thrills, that's not Thrills of a Naturalist, Snakes and Snake Hunting was one book that I ended up meeting who turned out to be one of my lifelong friends in the library, because in those days there was a little card in there and you put your name on it and you turn the card in, and then when you brought the book back, they put the card back in the book. And I checked this book out, I don't know how many times, and I kept seeing this name, Rick Abbott. And who in the heck's Rick Abbott? And then one day I walked into the library and this guy's sitting there reading Snakes and Snake Hunting. And no, let's see, can't remember if Snakes and Snake Hunting was the first or the second. But anyway, I met him through that, and he's been a lifelong friend. And he never got to the collection part that I had, but we traveled a lot and, spent a lot of time in the field.
Yes, sir. Yeah. And how valuable are those people to have in your life like that have no interest necessarily in keeping, but a passion for finding them in the wild?
Well, it's the same value as any friend. I mean, if you have a friend that shares your, excitement about collecting stamps or coins or snakes or cars or anything, I mean, it's just a companion with mutual interest. And in my case, it just happened to be reptiles.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Someone to sit there when you find the target species you're looking for and you're doing the happy dance in the middle of the woods.
Oh yeah, the first mountain king I found, I almost was so thrilled I was going to let it go. I was chasing this lizard, and it went under a rock, and I flipped the rock, and here's this mountain king with a dark soil background and the beautiful, red and yellow and black rings, and I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And you never forget the first. Now the 10th and the 50th and the 100th all kind of blend together, but the first one you'll never forget.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting how those moments, they sear themselves into your memory. And thinking about my first live Alterna I found, I can remember that and remember that feeling. And yeah, you do remember it.
7777 at 9:45 on Highway 118.
There you go.
That was my
Excellent.
first.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Well, we'll definitely make sure to follow up on that, and I know I'll nerd out on all that for sure. Well, excellent. And so, what got you into the propagation of reptiles? Where did that interest come from?
Well, back again in the late 70s, they started eliminating importations without special permits. And as a private person, you couldn't get the permits. And I kind of saw the handwriting on the wall and thought, we're not going to be able to, send a letter over to Japan or whatever and have somebody mail you something. We're going to have to start producing them in captivity. And so myself and several other people just started trying to figure out how to get them to breed. And the San Diego Zoo, I called them and they said, well, they don't breed in captivity. There's no way you can do that. And I thought, well, that's not right. And I mean, you could keep a king snake in captivity. And back in those days, you were afraid to let them get cool because they developed something called mouth rot. And so the belief at the time was you keep them warm. Well, they wouldn't breed, but if you caught a wild opposite sex and brought it in and threw it in with that snake, they would breed, and they would produce eggs one season until you kept them warm for the whole year. And so eventually we figured out, well, in the wild they get cool whether they like it or not. But what we were doing wrong in captivity was hot, cold, hot, cold. You need to lower the temperature gradually and then keep it low constantly for a while and then warm them back up. They don't get sick. And then, of course, we weren't sure if the drinking water that we were feeding them that had the chloramines in it and all that stuff was good. So we'd go out into rain puddles and collect water to make sure they got natural minerals and things that they do in the wild. And maybe domestic mice feeding on just mouse biscuits weren't enough. So we'd go out and, collect wild mice in traps. And we did all kinds of things to try to figure out how to get them to breed. And again, it's probably as simple as there's 8 different things involved, and 4 of them are very important and 4 of them aren't so important. And if you get any 3 of the important ones and any 2 of the non-important ones in combination, it'll work. Because you think, well, gee, all these things are really hard to breed, and then you hear about somebody that keeps a set of boa constrictors in a display case in front of a pet shop, and they breed and produce babies every year. Well, they shouldn't do that, but they did. So you're just trying to figure out what's doing this stuff. I first bred Argentine boas in 1977, and I had a colony of 3 very large ones that had transferred 2 different sets of hands trying to breed them. And I got them and managed to get them to breed after a year or 2 for a couple times. And it was purely by accident. I had them in some glass cages that were part of a rack system. And there was lights mounted underneath them shining down in the cages below. But they were in a cold garage with glass windows on the outside so that people coming in to look at my snakes could look at them, but they couldn't open the cages. And these snakes could lay up against the glass and be as cool as they wanted because the temperature there got down in the 50s, or they could coil up above the lights that were shining down below and also producing heat for the room, which was insulated. It was 10 by 17. And anyway, they chose to self-hibernate, if you want to call it that, or at least cool themselves. And I didn't even know what caused it until we figured it out a year or 2 later. But somehow or another, I produced Argentine boas.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, and I think you kind of already did, and you highlighted the many aspects where you guys were looking at it in this highly complex way, and then over time, I assume you came down to the conclusion, which is how you so eloquently put it right now, where you need to fit so many. There's only so many points you can hit, but if you hit 3 of those key, characteristics that you need to hit, and a couple of the other ones, you're going to see success. What were some of the other? I think you did that. When did you start to see? When did you come up with that idea? I guess when did that kind of formulate for
the
you?
snake room was again my version of Ditmars's snake room, and I finally bought a house, and I decided I was going to convert the garage into a snake building. Well, then the city comes along and says, well, you can't do that. You need us, you need the place for parking. I said, well, what if I don't want to park? Well, it's just the rule. That's the way it is. So I built the room inside the garage to where the garage door could still open, but then you'd run into a snake room. And that seemed to get by. Plus, I coordinated a friendship with the animal control of El Cajon, because I would give them lectures on the reptiles, and when they had a rattlesnake call or something, if it was out in the open, they just kill it. But if it went underneath a house or went underneath something, well, I'm not going under there, call Bob. And so I'd go over there and crawl under there and grab it, and then we'd take it out and relocate it. But it's just one of those things that back in the day when there weren't too many regulations, I had a collection of rattlesnakes that was in the garage of the mayor's son kept them. And there's a couple stories that can go along with that. But I mean, just things were a lot looser back then. It's not everybody trying to get into your business like they do today.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, let's unpack that a little bit more and talk about that. Having someone like the mayor's son as your friend seems like that would be beneficial in kind of getting helping grease the wheels and move forward with some of the things you wanted to do and being kind of a pioneer in that. What were some of those stories?
Well, excuse me. One of the things that happened as time went on is this reptile breeding became worldwide, and there was people that would come from around the different places in the world, particularly England and Germany, and they would fly around the United States and they would buy stuff from the breeders and under commission. They actually had a shopping list from all the people that in their countries that wanted to buy this stuff, and they would come over and basically buy whatever was on the list and then take it back and charge them usually 20-30% commission on it. Well, I had my colubrid snakes and I had my boas and stuff at the time, and essentially I thought, well, I would like to make my house you must stop on this shopping tour. And plus I was having some trouble with my neighbors, and at the time I was starting to earn quite a bit of money on this stuff. So I thought, well, I'll just buy the houses around me, and then I can evict anybody that gives me any crap. And I put a guy that's going to raise geckos and things in this house, and maybe a guy that was raised turtles and something in this house. And that worked for a while, but as they became successful and they knew all my contacts, they wanted to buy their own house, and I didn't want to sell them mine. So they would move out and buy their own houses and then compete with me, because I would basically tell them what they had to raise, or I'd pick people that were raising what I wanted them to raise. And so that didn't work too well. So I just ended up selling those houses and moving out of the neighborhood. Came up here to Campo in '92, and I've got 15 acres and can do pretty much what I want on the property. I live across the street from a grade school, but I can shoot a shotgun out the back window and nobody cares.
There you go. Well, too, I mean, just to think about the ingenuity that you had in that moment to go, this is the idea to do that, right? I don't think that as modern keepers we understand what the forefathers of this hobby were doing, right? Whether that was taking a plane ride across, the ocean to come over here and purchase snakes and purchase animals, or the opposite of that, propagating these animals and then traveling overseas with them to deliver them to buyers and this and that.
Yeah, I think the statute of limitations expired, but I smuggled 247 snakes into Germany.
The wonderful the port that is Germany that makes a lot of this hobby possible, right? So yes,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, some of these guys that some of them went to jail for smuggling and everything. I mean, did you really think that in this hobby, the way it is today, we would have leopard geckos and all the snakes we've got and all the different lizards we've got if somebody didn't break the law, if you will? Now, admittedly, back in the 70s, you could go down to Mexico and you could catch pretty much what you wanted, and you could declare them at the border and bring them back across. But I think late 60s or early 70s, that stopped with CITES. I can't remember when that all started, but it was quite a while ago. But we'd go down into Mexico, and there was people that would collect stuff and hold it for us. And then there was one guy down there that basically would collect Gila monsters and beaded lizards, and $20 each, you buy them and drive them back up here. I mean, things were different. I mean, back then I had a place where I used to catch desert iguanas, and out in the Borrego Desert here. And I used to go out there and I'd spend a day or two and I'd catch every one that I found and I'd sell them. And, wow, making a profit, terrible. But I only went there once, And a year later, I go back and there was just as many desert iguanas as there was the year I went through. But that was one person,
Yeah.
working this field. Now there's less fields and 100 people working it. And so it's not appropriate today. But back then, I could lay out a field of boards in the field and hit it once a week and find snakes for 10 years. And then on the 11th year, I go there and it's being plowed under and there's now 100 houses and you don't see a snake. So it's just times are different, and captive breeding is appropriate now. Back then, it wasn't really needed until the regulations started causing, as a cause and effect type thing.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, again, there's so many points you hit there that are good talking points. One of them being about the different time frame that we're in. It's so easy to look back now where we're at and say, oh, this was wrong of this person to do this, but now we have the luxury of time to understand and learn, and the hobby has evolved, but we as the modern hobbyists are, if it wasn't for people like yourself and many others doing those things at the time, we wouldn't have those species now. And so we have the luxury of getting to work with those animals, and they're not being taken from the wild anymore, and we are propagating them in captivity, which is good. That is good, and it produces interest in those animals and people that care about them, and hopefully translates to protections for those animals moving forward.
I think it does, and that's a very good point. I was going to try to make that somewhere in our little conversation here, but you just made it. But yeah, I mean, if you develop an interest in something and you've got a beautiful animal that's been bred for colors and combinations over here, or you can go out and catch one that might have parasites and everything, you're more than likely to want to see the one in the wild, but you can buy the one that is in better shape and adapted to captivity and is clean. I mean, there's no substitute for seeing something in the wild. But I mean, I can remember back when I'd catch a California Mountain King, and that was money. Now I could actually go and watch them crawl away, and it wouldn't bother me because I produced lots of them. In fact, I like to feel like I have produced more snakes in captivity than I ever took from the wild, because I've done this for many years. And I wasn't really field collecting that many snakes for that long.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So I balanced the books. Excuse me.
All
Hope
good.
my
Yes,
throat
sir.
holds up for this.
All good. Yeah. No. Like I said, if you need to grab water or anything like that, just let me know. No issue.
I might grab a beer, but
Well, there you go. You can catch up. You can catch up. Well, good. So, and just again, there was other points I wanted to make there, but as I'm editing this, I'll be kicking myself in the butt, going, "Damn it, I meant to say this." So,
you can always call back.
well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. But
Come
what?
on out sometime and we'll have some of that OP.
There you go. Yes, sir. I'd be sure to make that. I'd be sure to make that. I'd make those available. Well, and so again, to have the foresight to go through and go, okay, I'm gonna buy the neighborhood and do that, and make it that attraction to bring those people. What were some of the characters that you met at those times, and do any of them stand out to you? Any stories from that?
Not anymore. I had one guy that was doing boas and pythons across the street, and then we ended up renting the house to the next door to his sister. I only ended up with 3 houses before I realized that wasn't going to work. But it was just an idea. I mean, it's one of those things that you come up with.
Yeah. Well, what about did it ever, I assume you did have some customers come to the shop or the houses and
Oh
look at
yeah,
what
the
you
house.
had.
I mean, I had, in fact, Chris Madison. You probably know him from England. He's written several books. One of his books on breeding snakes. He brought him and his girlfriend, or he and his girlfriend came over, and they spent about 4 days photocopying all of my records because I kept very detailed records, and pretty much he turned it into a book. I mean, we were sitting there drinking beer one night, and he said, "Well, Bob, why don't you write a book?" And I said, "Well, that intrigues me a little bit. How how much do you get for that? I said, well, I get about $10,000 per book, plus, there's some royalties. And we happened to be sitting in one of the rooms where I had about 200 shoe boxes full of snakes along the wall. And I said, you see that wall over there? I make $20,000 a year on that wall. So why don't you write the book and just reference me and you can use all my information? But one thing he did say to me that hit my ego a little bit was, well, wouldn't you like people to come up to you and say, Mr. Applegate, can you sign my book? And that was a little bit of the motivation for writing the 2 small books that I did write.
Very interesting. It's interesting how you can have those pivoting moments in your life, right? Where someone says, strokes your ego
Yeah,
and
it hits the ego
challenges
a
you.
little bit.
Yeah.
Although
And there's
I'll
nothing
tell
wrong
you,
with that.
I'm still kind of primitive, though, because I guess there's a old herpers thing or something on the internet. My
Yes,
wife
sir.
shows me stuff once in a while, and they showed a picture of me, and it said goat underneath. I said, why the heck would they call me a goat? And then she explained to me it stands for got old and tired.
Oh, well. Well, not that. No, sir. Greatest of all time. And then I think that's inappropriate.
I
And
didn't
that,
realize that at the time, and goat sounded, got old and tired sort of was appropriate.
yes, sir. Well, I think the other definition suits you just fine. And no, that group has been a wonderful wealth of knowledge, and has helped me endlessly with this project. Just so many great old price lists and things that I was lucky enough to see the tail end of when I started getting into the hobby. But it's so cool to see these old price lists and the conversations that you get to be a fly on the wall, and the people you get to meet. Many guests I have gotten is from that group, and super cool as a young person. That's
Are you the one that put out the request to one old price list?
No, sir, no, sir. I think that is another gentleman. Um, I'm forgetting his name. I feel bad. I'm terrible with names.
Oh, I am
Um,
too, believe me.
yeah, well, but no, sir. But that gentleman has worked on many projects, and I think he's published at least one book on herpetoculture and keeping that is very very interesting. And I apologize that I don't remember
That's
the
no
names.
problem.
Well, that's so cool. And so with that, and getting to move on, and something that your name echoes in the hobby, where animals from lineages that you started are all over the world now at this point, and have that they carry that name, your name and your effort. Where did some of those lines come from, and what are the origins?
Well, the Applegate gopher snake was actually a wild caught snake that was crawling across the driveway of a trailer park. And a friend of mine who was a lizard person had it brought to their shop. And at the time, it didn't really look that impressive. But as it grew up, the orange started coming out and everything. And as I recall, somewhere about 1995, they had a reptile conference here in San Diego. And back then, they had the lineages of this, snake and that snake. And people were coming over, probably 100 or more people came over and saw this and thought, well, now you've got an Applegate line. Because at the time, I didn't even think about that. And that's kind of how it got coined, is the Applegate albino San Diego gopher snake. And then another friend of mine came up and he had a, excuse me, he had two, well, okay, he went over to Arizona and bought offspring from 2 different wild caught females from the same area and brought them back here to the San Diego County and then bred them. And one of those hypo, no black, orange, and yellow Arizona Mountain Kings showed up. Well, he's a very private person, and he wanted me to market them. So he brought them to me and said, why don't we call this the Applegate Pyro? And so we did, and it became very successful as well. And as far as I know, those are the only 2 lines that actually carry my name.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah. Something I've spoken about before, and I think again, you are a perfect example of that. Is the art that is reptiles, right? There's something that you noticed in that animal, right? Or a group of friends noticed in that animal, and you spent the time, which the finiteness of our lives is what makes time valuable, and you put the effort into reproducing that.
Yeah, well,
Many,
at the time, a lot of this stuff you weren't sure if it was just a one anomaly or whether you're going to be able to actually reproduce it. And back in that time, they were having a lot of trouble with the albino Sonoran gopher snakes growing up and then dying because they were inbred so much because everybody just wanted the money and they wanted to breed. And I'll call it albino just for the sake of conversation, but amelanistics. Um, they just kept inbreeding, and they started having a problem. So I went out to the area where, fortunately, this particular gopher snake was a male, and I went out to the area where it was found and caught 6 different females and raised them up, and then outbred and outcrossed. And it was a lot more work because, of course, you produced a lot of hets, but and then sometimes you'd breed a het to a het just to get further unrelated, and so then you'd get some, I don't know what they are, but it took a long time to. Fortunately, the starter snake was gorgeous on its own, but just to avoid any sort of an inbreeding problem, because my belief is that a normal wild snake, you can't really inbreed them too bad, because you look at that mountain over there, and the snakes have been there for thousands of years, and probably they're about as inbred as they can get, but they're normal snakes. But you get something screws up in the genetics to where all of a sudden it's not producing the black melanin color or whatever. Well, what else might have been wrong? There's a lot higher chance if that particular gene was messed up, maybe some other genes in there are messed up as well, and you could end up with a death gene or something. So you try very hard to isolate what you want, but to make sure there's no bad baggage that comes along with it.
yes, sir. Yeah. No, very cool. And then so I think that's something that, interesting point you made is something that you did. Um, as the hobbies move forward, locality has become more important in a more common keeping where people are
Okay, let me
interested.
stop you for just a minute. Quit calling it a hobby, because
Okay.
IRS doesn't recognize deductions on a hobby.
Yes,
This
sir.
is a business.
Yes, sir. Yeah. No,
It's like
100%.
your mouse business. That's not a hobby. That is
That's
a
true.
business,
Uh,
because you get to write off a percentage of your housing, your electricity, your whatever. If it's a hobby, you can't deduct anything, but you pay taxes on anything you make.
yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think I'm just using that as a broad spectrum
I'm just kind
catch
of kidding,
all.
but it's a true fact.
But yeah, no,
I've been audited a couple of times.
yes, no, I mean taxes are no joke, so I can relate with that. It's not a hobby for me, but the just again, I apologize. I'm using hobby in a generic term to
No, I know.
cover
I'm just
everything.
having a
Yes,
little
sir.
fun with you, but it's actually a truism.
Yes, no, 100%, 100%. I'm just trying to think of I don't want to. I'll try to think of a better way to
Now you're
describe it.
talking like my wife. Yes, no. She says it in the same sentence, and I don't know which way she wants it.
Whichever way you want it. I don't
There you go.
know. Which you pick. Uh, well, and so okay, where was I? So with that being said, the locality keeping, what why did you do that? Why did you go back to that area to pick females that came from the same area that male was found? What was the motivation behind that?
Well, one, I wanted to take a chance of maybe finding other animals that might have been carrying or not carrying that gene that
Mm-hmm.
caused that to affect. But the locality specific was just getting started with the gray band collectors. And there was people that were talking about, well, I want them from the rock pile on 170, and I want them from Black Gap, and I want them from, you know, whatever you want to come up with. And I just thought, I'm going to just keep it from the locality, which was Lakeside, California, rather than, breed them in with something that might have been found 50 miles away or something. So it was just something that I just thought was probably the way to go about doing it. There was no real reason other than I knew places in that area where I could find gopher snakes, and it just seemed like a good idea.
100%. Yeah. No, that's so interesting. And I'm not surprised to hear that that's kind of the early influences of the West Texas scene and kind of the bleed out of that and how interesting that is. Very, very cool. I appreciate that little insight there.
Yeah, you Texans started that.
Yeah. Well, that's and so let's talk about Texas a little bit. What were your interests coming out to Texas?
Well,
What are your thoughts on gray bands?
the snakes in the Big Bend area weren't in either the Western or the Eastern Reptiles of North America books. And you get down there and you hear about a suboc or a scoot or a scutellatus was found other places, but I mean, there weren't even pictures in books that you could find an Alterna or a Blair's at the time. I guess they eliminated that. But I just went down there on vacation from the fire department and had friends that wanted to help me hunt. And the first 2 or 3 trips, we didn't find anything. And I ran into a gentleman named John Hollister, who happened to be good friends with another friend of mine. And so he told me, Bob, you're driving too fast. I said, what do you mean you're driving? I'm driving too fast. I've got aircraft landing lights on the front of my van, and I can see a blind snake 100 yards down the road. He says, well, you won't be able to see these. And he had caught one. And so he told me that the speed I'm driving, the light ones would look like one of those plastic tops of a 6-pack, and the dark ones would look like a piece of fan belt. And so he had me back up a couple 100 yards, and then he laid his snake out, and I got up to speed. And except for the fact he was standing next to it, I wouldn't have seen it. I wouldn't have recognized it as a snake, even though we were seeing subocs and transpacus and whatever. Oh, that was a suboc. The rattlesnakes and the different snakes, we could see them to where we had to speed up to get up to where they were. But for whatever reason, the Alterna don't seem to reflect the lights back. Very similar to the lyre snake and the rosy boa out here in California. So what we ended up doing was getting a pillow and having the passenger hang out the window and drive slow with a spotlight shining where the brush comes up against the shoulder of the road. And then we started finding them.
Interesting. If it
wasn't for him, I'm not sure I ever would have seen. Well, one we saw crawling out on the road. It was about a 2.5 footer, beautiful light phase, but it was really weird because I had a sunroof in this van, and I had people that would stand up on the engine cowling and shine a light, like you said, along the road. And I turned to slap him in the leg, and I looked back, and it was gone. And I thought, it can't be gone. It was right in the middle of the road. There's no snake that's that fast. And then it started moving, and I saw it again. And it blended in so well with that rock surface on that Highway 118. Not 118. What the hell was that? It was 90, I guess, out there in the Comstock Langtree area.
Okay, that's right, yeah.
But anyway, it blended in so well with that rock stuff that when it wasn't moving, even with aircraft landing lights shining on it, you couldn't see it.
Yeah. Wow, how cool is that? That's so cool. That's wow. Okay. And so, when was your first trip out there? What year was that your first trip? And then when did you meet John Hollister?
Well, the first 3 that we caught were in '77, but I know I made a couple trips before that, so probably '75 was my first years out there.
Very cool. And then so coming to Texas and then going back, obviously, right? I agree. Locality to me just makes perfect sense, right? Coming in, my main interest early on was Alterna and West Texas animals, and really shaped my passion.
Well,
locality.
the Trans-Pecos rat snakes are beautiful snakes, but for
Yes.
breeding purposes, they're a pain in the ass because all of my snakes will be be normally hatched late June or July. Excuse me. I've been having a lot of trouble with my asthma lately, but
Okay, yes, sir. Like I
those
said, can
damn
you grab a
subocs
drink?
wouldn't hatch until October. And
Yeah.
so if you had a shipment of snakes was going to Europe with 50 snakes and 6 of them were subocs, you had to hold the other 44 snakes for an extra 2 months waiting for the darn subocs to hatch.
Yes, yes, and Subok and Baird's rat snakes, I think are Alterna, Baird's, and Subok are some of the coolest snakes to me. I
All
mean,
the
just
years that I hunted Texas, I never found a Baird's.
really.
I mean, I think I saw one once, but I'm not sure. But I've never actually caught one, and I've made 12 trips.
Well, I have found more Alterna than I have Baird's, so there's validity to that for sure. And some people seem to find them all the time. That's the part that I don't get. I'm doing something wrong. Anytime I go out there, I'm always solely focused on Alterna. Yeah, I've never found a Mexican hognose either, but it's just because I just don't try at all. So
I found a couple of the Texas lyre snakes, which are supposedly more rare than the others, but I've never found in fact, I've never found that hognose snake either. I found a little hooknose snake or whatever it was, but never a hognose.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. The hook nose are super cool too. They're just West Texas is for me a very magical place, and
Oh,
I
I
really
agree.
I
I
really do
agree.
enjoy it. I'm addicted to say the least. Well, that's so cool. And so, what were some of your other trips like throughout the world?
Well, Africa was exciting, catching spitting cobras and a 17-foot python, and wrestling with an anaconda in the Amazon was exciting. Um, to be honest with you, I don't think I'd want to go back to the Amazon. I'm not really into humidity and bugs. I was out with a flashlight one night walking through the jungle, and we were slathered in anti-bug stuff and wearing long sleeve shirts to keep the bugs off of us. And I guess my sleeve slid back a little bit because I looked down at my wrist and it looked like I was wearing a wristband of black. I thought, wait a minute, I'm not wearing a watch or whatever. And I slapped it, blood everywhere. It was just that little narrow band where the spray didn't hit. The mosquitoes were lined up to where it looked like a wristwatch. And it was exciting. I'm glad I went. I saw stuff that is still in my mind, but except for the political stuff, I'd go to Africa before I'd go back to the jungles.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I can agree with
Now in
that.
Japan, you wouldn't think snake hunting was much in Japan, but they have these things. I don't know. I just want to say mamushi or something, but something that was like a water moccasin. And this Japanese guy was taking me out into this area, and I'm looking around and I'm seeing American bullfrogs, and I'm thinking, well, that's kind of weird. But we're going along, and we're probably in 4 to 6 inches of water, and I find one of these water moccasin things, so I put my foot on it and reach down and pick it up behind the head. It's about a 2.5 foot whatever, and crazy American, crazy American. I mean, I guess you're not supposed to do that.
How interesting is that? Yeah, I just spoke to a gentleman not too long ago that was doing eco tour guides in Japan, and that was super super cool. Not something I'd really thought about, and very interesting. What
Well, you
made
better be a
you?
smoker because the country smells like an ashtray.
Yeah. Well, what made you want to go over to Japan and herp that area?
Well, I had a friend that basically he was having excuse me, he was going over. He used to buy snakes from me and ship them over there and take them over there. And I guess my name is pretty well known over there. He wanted me to go over and be at his booth while he was selling my snakes. And so he paid for my trip. And while we were there, he just took me out to show me some of the reptile sites. Still there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, I
I
thought
kind of cut
maybe I
out first.
moved the
Yeah.
keyboard and maybe I shut us off somehow.
No, okay, it lagged for a little second there, but you're here. You're good. Excellent. So you're saying you had a friend that from Japan that wanted you to come over and
Well, he
visit.
was over here, but he was doing business over there.
Okay.
He actually had a Japanese restaurant over here. So when I deliver him snakes, he would give me a case of this sake stuff. And boy,
Nice.
that's, or at least the beer is pretty powerful stuff. I had a guy stop by and have a beer with me, just one, and we drank the one and was staggering when he left. So, but but anyway, he I guess for namesake or whatever, he just wanted me to come over and the Japanese people were coming up and wanting my autograph and all this kind of stuff. So it was ego stroking for sure. But
Yep.
it apparently gave him some legitimacy that he knew me and was selling my snakes.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, that's, you know, I don't know if it's an appropriate question to ask, but I think it's an interesting one and kind
Well,
of
I've only
you're
been asked two stupid questions since I've been in this business. I doubt if you'll ask number three, so go ahead.
all right. So having that kind of early on with I think you said the gentleman's name was Chris Madison, you know, kind of is that correct? Was that his name?
Yes.
And him suggesting, you know, hey, maybe you should also write a book and these are the aspects. And then to now be at a point later down in your journey where you're flying to Japan to attend a reptile show and that has come to fruition where people are coming up to you and going, hey, and understandably they want your autograph, they want to meet you, and it does add legitimacy to have someone
Well,
like
the
yourself
same
there.
thing in Europe. They flew me over to England to give a lecture to the All Royal something or another, and I thought I was going to meet the Queen. I didn't have any fancy clothes, so I bought a T-shirt that looked like a tuxedo and wore it.
I love it. Well, that's that's something I've said before. Where if there's a wedding convention on one side and then there's a snake show on the other side, I know my side, my line that I'm going to go stand in, and obviously with fashion sense like that, we know where it kind of came down, and a common ilk that is still the community that it is. Very, very cool.
Well, I try to have fun, but basically the reptile business has made me a multimillionaire, basically, and I owe generations of people that are gone now. But I just feel like it's kind of something that I should do is to pass on whatever I can to help the oncoming people.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, you're doing that, and you already have. As the point that I was making earlier, where uh, art is something I very much so appreciate, and the idea of a great sculptor making an art piece, and once they've made it, it's done. Right? You leave it, and you don't let it get rained on. You don't let it get knocked over, and that piece of artwork is gonna withstand time. What's so interesting about the reptile hobby is a constant care and propagation of these animals. They have a lifespan that is shorter than ours. And so when you go to any of the modern internet marketplaces and type in Applegate, animals that bear your lineage are going to come up all over the world.
Hmm.
And what a cool living statue that you made that will continue as long as there's an interest in the animals that you produced, and there will be. And
Well, that's
people
very
that don't
interesting because I have, but basically, I can answer email and play card games, and even what we're doing right now is above and beyond. I mean, you saw the problem I was having, even figuring out which way to turn the camera. So
You did great. You did great.
I'm
We're here
not, I'm
now.
not savvy with all this technical stuff.
But I mean, but that's the reality of it, right? I mean, before I knew who you were, I had heard of your animal, your lines of animal. Now, that was many, many years ago, and I know who you are, but I learned about you because of the name that was connected to the animals, and that will live on for the foreseeable future. And that's pretty cool when you think about it.
Yeah, I didn't go into that with the intention, but it's kind of a nice spinoff.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Well, the intention and the effort, right? It's the time that you invested in it, And that's what is the cool part about it, is our time is finite, and so that you chose to do that is the admirable part, and why it's very fitting that it carries your name. You know, thanks. It's very cool.
Welcome.
Well, excellent. And so, kind of where we're at now, as we start to wind down here, this is a question I like to ask. Where do you see the hobby going? Where do you think it's going to go with the communities that you've seen, or what you're thinking about? Where do you see it moving forward?
Well, I don't know. It's already $1 billion a year business now, and I hope it's big enough that it can't be wiped out by some of these PETA people. Um, I mean, years ago, a friend of mine got some PETA shirts because they were going to protest against one of the shows or something. And he got a white shirts with a blue PETA written across it. And then he had underneath it, people eating tasty animals. And as he was walking towards the show, the PETA people we're over here, we're very funny, when they saw it, realized what it was. And I said, I got to have one of those. And I've worn it to a few shows. But, I mean, I don't know where it's going. I mean, you got people fighting for our rights, supposedly, that are on our corner. And then you got the animals, the people that, if it's a wild animal, you aren't going to be able to have it in captivity. But then again, you got the people that are crossbreeding snakes, and they don't exist in the wild. So you can make a case of, well, these are domesticated. They're not wild because they don't exist in the wild, and they're not even a real species, so to speak. That's was the big buzzwords when all those crosses were done. Most of us that have been out in the field and catching things in the wild, you look at these cross things like you'd look at as a mutt at a purebred dog show, but still they had a point. We could have been wiped out by the legislation of there shall be no keeping of any wild animal, and yet the people who are doing all the crossing would have been the only ones allowed to have stuff. So I don't know where it's going. I hope there's enough of us that they can't wipe it out.
Yes, sir. Yeah, yeah. No, with organizations like USARC out there that are doing that good work and taking care of the hobby, hopefully more of that
I hope
spreads.
they are, but I asked them for help, and I've given them thousands of dollars over the years, and I had some trouble with my Gila monsters in California. I had permits and canceled permits and extended permits that were canceled, and I finally ended up selling them to China. But I asked them to look into it, and they didn't do anything for me. So I'm sure they're probably doing some good in some corners, but they didn't do anything for me. So I've stopped giving them anything.
Well, that's unfortunate that happened, and hopefully the right. I don't know, right? But you hope
No, I
that
don't
will
either. I
affect
mean,
it as positive.
they're probably doing some good, but we'll see.
Yes, sir. Yeah. No. I mean, valid point for sure. Well, excellent. Well, you know what? I don't want to keep you here longer than what I said. So, but
What did you say? I don't remember you giving me a timeline.
About an hour to an hour and a half if you're down to keep going.
That's what they said in England. You got an hour. I ended up there for 3 hours answering questions.
Well, I mean, I'll keep talking to you and keep going as long as you want. It's completely up to you if you want to keep chatting.
If you got anything else to add, I mean, if you feel we're done, we're done. But if you got anything else, so you can always call back.
Yes, sir. No, I mean, I would love to keep talking if you're okay with that. We'll keep it going.
Yeah, as long as I don't start coughing too much, we'll be good.
Okay, well, you let me know. And so, what are some of the other standouts in some of the characters that you met early on, or just in general, that were maybe influential in your keeping or the way you thought about reptiles?
Well, I'd have to mention Ernie Wagner. I mean, he's quite a character. He was a keeper at the Woodland Park Zoo up there in Seattle, I guess it was. I met him years ago, and he gave my girlfriend at the time, a corn snake, which she was excited about. And I don't know. I mean, there's been so many people that I don't want to start naming names because I'm going to leave somebody out. I like to tell people at 80 years old, my brain filled up and I had to start kicking stuff out to make room for new stuff. And if I kicked out something that was important to you, I apologize, but that's just the way it is. So, because I'll be 81 in April, and I never thought I'd live this long, so don't know how to handle it, I guess.
Well, I mean, you've lived a million cool adventures that anybody would be envious of, and so it makes sense. There's only so much. I think that something that many of us that have something we're passionate about can recognize sometimes when we find ourselves in a moment where it might be a once in a lifetime thing, and you find yourself stood there trying to soak in as much of that information as possible. And do you have any moments like that that stand out for you where
Well, the first gray-banded king snake stands out. The first California mountain king snake stands out. First spitting cobra stands out. The 17-foot African rock python stands out. I mean, there's so many firsts and so many, wow, this is something that I'll probably never do again or never see again, that they all kind of run together. I mean, sometimes I don't believe I really did that stuff. I'm almost feel like I'm making stuff up because that couldn't have happened that way. But then I remember it that way. So I'm pretty sure it did.
Yes, yes. And then something else that I think that should be spoken about is another thing that bears your name, not only the animals that you produced, is a caging system and a style of keeping. What are
That
some of
that
the
I will that I will credit to Ernie Wagner, because years ago we were staying at his place, and he had a cage sitting on top of dresser drawers, and he had drilled a hole in the bottom of the floor of the cage, and so the snake could go down in the top drawer. And I thought, well, what a novel idea. That's really cool, but I don't want a room full of dressers. And so I designed the cages with the individual drawers built in to where I didn't have a dresser to put a cage on each time. And that's where I designed the cage. And then I got a friend of mine that's a real good cabinet maker and told him what I wanted. And he did all the measurements to figure out where the pipes could go and still fit and the drawer wouldn't hit them and all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
yes,
that's
sir.
just basically an idea that I got from Ernie Wagner and then expanded it exponentially.
Yes, sir. Yeah. No, that's so interesting, and that's yes, that's interesting, right? That I had heard that, right? That Ernie Wagner was the guy to come up with that, and that's interesting to hear and good to hear. Why do you think that your name got associated with it?
Probably
Not that.
because of the books and that I get around more than Ernie does.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Right. Well, that makes sense. That makes
Well,
sense. 100%.
he never went beyond the one cage,
Gotcha.
and I've got
Okay.
walls of them.
What was Ernie Wagner as like as a person as a herper? What was he thinking about? I mean, if he's thinking about that caging system.
Ernie was kind of the aged hippie, just really fun to be around. Um, would share pretty much any information he had with you, although back then we were just getting started in the breeding stuff. But I mean, and I think he's still around. I believe he lives up in like Long Beach or someplace up the coast of California now.
Oh,
But
okay.
he's an excellent, wonderful person.
Excellent. Well, I apologize. I wasn't sure there, and I assumed wrong. So my apology. I'll have to follow up with that. Hopefully,
Well, I
hopefully I
haven't
can speak
heard
to
that
him.
he died. I don't think
Gotcha.
he's into reptiles anymore. Last time he was down here, he brought me some beads of the kind you'd like those old collar bead things
Yeah.
that you'd wear sort of like a tie, but they were beads. He was into polishing rocks and drilling holes in them and making beads and stuff out of them. So he's just, again, a very interesting person.
Yeah. How interesting, especially if he's not into reptiles now, right?
I don't
That
believe he is.
yeah, it almost makes it even cooler, where it's just like he might have no idea. Like there, right? There's a sea of people out there going, "Oh, this caging system is so cool," and him being one of the people to come up with it. I mean,
I think he visited here when I had the cages, so I'm sure he's aware of,
yeah,
in fact, I probably thanked him for the idea.
yeah. How cool is that? And then, so to speak about your books for a moment, what besides that influence to do it, what made you finally do it, and what was that process like, and what did you
Well,
feel like?
Philippe de Voselier came to me. He was hanging around here a few times, and he came to me and said, "Would you write a book on milk snakes?" And I thought, well, sure, yeah, I'll do it. And so I happened to work on an island at the time, and I had a lot of free time in the evenings. So he gave me kind of I think he gave me one of the other books that was on some other subject, but he wanted, a chapter about this and a chapter about that and a chapter about that. So I sat down and basically free wrote some notes and everything, and then I tried to put it together in some sort of order, and sat over in my office and typed it out, and then submitted it to him. And the girl looked at me and she said, "You typed this?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "God, the rewrites must have been terrible." I said, "What's a rewrite?" I mean, I basically submitted it first copy, and it was accepted and made into the book. And then he wanted to expand it. Let's see, wait a minute. I guess that's when Bob Ashley approached me and wanted to, because I had the patent rights on it, and he wanted me to do a book on milk snakes and king snakes, but I could use the first book as kind of a beginning point and then just add to it. And so I did that and did the second book for him. And so, Bob Ashley at the museum over there in New Mexico?
Yes, sir. The Chiricahua Desert Museum. Yes, sir. Yeah.
He's a guy you'd probably want to talk to, because he's basically does the keeping, but he's gotten it into the commercial museum and the big shows and all that kind of stuff. I mean, Wayne Hill probably started the first show on the East Coast, and then Ray Busby started the one out here on the West, but then Bob Ashley took it to another level.
Yes, sir. Yeah. No, definitely someone that's on my radar that I'm trying to. I've not on Facebook that I've seen, so that's kind of my barrier to entry there. And then for me, and then I have looked up their website, and I've been meaning to send an email and try to get in contact with them, because I would definitely love to speak with them for sure.
Yeah, apparently I'm going there in June or July. I guess I'm supposed to be on. He hadn't told me exactly what I'm doing. I told him I'd try to make whatever his next little thing was, and somebody else told me that they got some kind of brochure that I'm going to be on some sort of a board or committee. So I suppose I got to talk to him about what the heck it is I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I told him I'd help him while I was there. So I guess that he took that as, yeah, okay, I'll put him on this. So we'll see, but it's still a few months off, so I haven't called him to find out yet.
Yes, sir. Very cool. Very cool. Well, excellent. Well, by no means do I think I've asked you every question that I should. And again, when I'm editing this, I will be kicking myself in the butt going, I should have asked this. And so I know I'll be taking notes. And
well, I'm really surprised when I told you I'd only been asked two stupid questions. You didn't ask me what they were, because that was a lead in, and most people ask me what they were.
Gotcha. Well, what are the stupid questions?
Well, one of them I had is these albino speckled king snakes. And the guy asked me, if I buy this from you, can you guarantee me its parents weren't sterile? And the second dumb question was, how much are your $65 milk snakes? Those two I thought were pretty dumb. There was a little logic behind the speckled king snake story, because we were having a lot of trouble breeding albino to albino. It seemed like you got bad eggs. But if you bred a het to an albino, either way, male, female, which didn't matter which, then you get fertile eggs. And so he was concerned about the fertility, but the actual question was pretty stupid.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, for those to be standouts, but I can relate as someone that is in the animal trade. Yes, sir. The questions you get hit with sometimes will surprise you, where you have to sit there and go, all right, here's your answer.
Again, I try to be polite, and I try to answer it as best I can. Sometimes I try to hold a laugh back, but I mean, normally, those are the only two that really stand out. So the rest of them haven't been as bad.
There you go. Well, I'm glad I didn't top any of those. Well,
Nope, you didn't.
excellent. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I definitely will follow up with you in the future, and I hope we do this again. And again, just thank you so much for your time today, and I've really appreciated our conversation. Thank you for what you've done for the hobby.
You're more than welcome, and come out and have some of those OPs with me sometime.
Yes, sir. I hope to get to do that one day. Excellent.
Sounds good. Appreciate you, man. Do what you're doing and do a good job at it.
I'm trying. Thank you.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Let me zoom out on you here. Okay, you got a message for the time capsule?
Yeah, and it's simply this. My prediction for you is that even though you'll forget all about this in some way consciously, next summer at about this time, you'll remember to return.